Effort, Grace, and Destiny by Arthur Osborne. For many devotees, the writings of Arthur Osborne, September 25, 1906, May 8, 1970, were our first introduction to the teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi. Osborne's eloquent and engaging style, coupled with his sincere devotion, enabled him to explain clearly the intricacies of the path of self inquiry to those who were not necessarily familiar with the cultural nuances of daily Hindu life. He, along with Sri Ganesan, established the Mountain Path Journal in 1964, and this journal, published by Sri Ramanasramam, continues to radiate the grace of Sri Bhagavan until the present day. Arthur wrote many editorials and articles for the Mount Path, some under his name and others under a nom de plume. They were all grounded in and inspired by Sri Bhagavan, and his words never fail to provide us all with an impetus to dive deeper into the heart, the source of all. The following is an editorial from the book Be Still. It is the wind that sings on the necessity of the dissolution of the false ego. It is said in scriptures and by gurus that an aspirant must make effort on the path, but that grace also is necessary, and that in the end, realization is bestowed by grace, not achieved by effort. It is said in the Upanishads that the Atma chooses whom it will. This is a hard saying. Those in whom the spiritual urge is powerful do not worry their heads over it, but strive because they must, because they are drawn to without any thought of reward. Those, however, in whom the mind is too active and the spirit too weak are apt to be puzzled and ask why they should make any effort if the final achievement is not to be won by effort but bestowed by grace. They also ask why the Atma should choose one rather than another. For such people, I will try to clarify the saying. Who is the you that has to make effort, and who is the God or Atma that chooses and that bestows grace on one rather than another? The essence of a man is pure spirit, or which comes to the same, pure being or pure universal consciousness. This spirit prowls in the line, spreads in the tree, endures in the stone. In man alone, it not only lives but knows that it lives. The difference between man and other animals is not that man has greater ability. In many ways, he has less, but that he knows that he is man. He is self consciously man. This is through the human mind, which, looking outward, knows and dominates the world. Looking inward, knows and reflects being as the essence and source of the world. However, the ability to do this implies also the ability to not do it, to regard oneself as a complete autonomous individual and forget the inner reality. The various religions express this simple truth through myth, allegory, and doctrine and are apt to be puzzling. In the Quran, it is said that Allah offered the trust to the heavens, earth, and the mountains, but all declined it. Only man accepted and was untrue to it. Religions assert that God gave man free will, which implies the freedom to rebel. In Christianity, it is said that man is fallen on account of original sin. The book of Genesis gives the story of how man fell into the domain of opposites, the differentiation of good and evil. All these are allegories of the simple truth stated above. The mind creates an ego, a seemingly complete, autonomous individual self, which, although illusory, seems to be the reality of one. This is the state known in Hinduism as ajnana or ignorance. In Christianity, it is called original sin. In Islam, in its more violent form, it is known as kafir or denial, which in its milder form, recognizing the spirit as real, but believing the ego also to be real, it is called shirk or association of the other with God. This is the obstruction to self-realization. Therefore, it has to be removed. That is why the masters say that self-realization is not something new to be achieved, but an eternally existent state to be discovered and revealed. Therefore, they compare it to an overcast sky. The clear sky does not have to be created, only the clouds covering it to be blown away, or to a pond overgrown with water lilies. The water is there all the time and only has to be revealed by clearing away the plants that have overgrown it. To do this constitutes the effort of which the teachers and scriptures speak. The mind has created the obstruction. The mind has to remove it. But merely to recognize this, to recognize that the ego is, according to Advaitin, an illusory self, or according to the dualist, a creation of the spirit to which it should be submitted and totally passive, is far from constituting the full effort required. Indeed, it increases the obligation for total effort and therefore the guilt in not making effort. The effort involves the will and emotions as well as the understanding and therefore has to be persistent, determined, and skillful. The ego has put out tentacles which cling to the world, and either these have to be lopped off or the ego itself killed. It craves the admiration or submission of other egos, and therefore humility is enjoined. It craves enjoyment of creation in its own right instead of being a mere channel through which the spirit perceives and enjoys it. And therefore, celibacy and asceticism are sometimes prescribed, and self-indulgence is always in all religions forbidden. The attempt to lop off the tentacles of ego has been compared in mythology to a battle with a many-headed giant who grew two new heads for each one lopped off. The only way of disposing him was to strike at the heart and kill the entire being, not deal with the heads individually. The campaign must be skillful and intelligently planned as well as ruthless. What wonder if different masters in different religions have prescribed different ways of conducting it? The goal in all cases is the same: the taming or destruction of the ego, or the discovery that it never really existed. Methods such as I have been alluding to consist largely in curtailing the ego's outer manifestations so as to induce the mind to turn inwards to the self or spirit behind it. It is also possible to proceed in the opposite direction by turning inward to the spirit and thence deriving strength to renounce the outer manifestations. This is the path of love and devotion, worshipping God submitting to him, calling upon his name, striving to serve and remember him with one's whole life. Either path can be followed, or both together. A third path is that of questioning the very existence of the ego by self-inquiry. All this is effort. Then what about grace? Grace is the natural flow of the spirit into and through the mind and faculties. There is nothing capricious or erratic about it. Bhagavan said, grace is always there. It is only you who have to make yourself receptive to it. It is likened traditionally to the sunlight falling on a flower garden. If one bud opens and not another, it is not due to any partiality on the side of the sun, but only to the maturity or immaturity of the buds. Or if the sunlight penetrates one room but not another, it is simply because the doors and windows are open in one and in the other shut. Why then is it said that Atma chooses whom it will, and that the final realization comes by grace, not by effort, in order to remove the insidious idea that the ego self can continue to exist and attain something called realization, whereas all it can do is to immolate itself and be replaced by the realized state of the spirit, which is ever-present grace. The mind makes efforts to remove obstructions. It is hard for it to understand that it is itself the final obstruction. The very desire for realization has to be carefully watched and can become an impediment, for it implies someone to achieve something. At the end, all that the mind is called on to do is to keep still and allow the grace to flow unimpeded. But that is the hardest thing of all for it to do, till in the end all battles fought, all earthly loves abjured, down in the east there is no other way but to be still. In the stillness then to find the giants all were windmills, all the strife self-made, unreal. Even he that strove, a fancied being, as when that good night woke from delirium, and with a loud cry rendered his soul to God. On the devotional path, this danger of supposing that it is the ego who strives and attains, this warning against desires, even the desire to get realization, is expressed in the attitude that true service of God must be for love alone, with no thought of reward. He who asks for reward is a merchant, not a lover. The impossibility of achieving when there is no one to achieve explains why a guru will never answer the question, when shall I attain realization? It implies the false presumption there is an individual me. When will it cease to exist? Whereas the guru realizes the ultimate truth that there is no being of the unreal and no not being of the real. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 16. Not that the unreal ego will cease to be at such and such a point in time, but that it is not now, never has been, and never could be. Therefore, the attitude of mind that questions when one can attain realization or whether it is one's destiny to be realized in this lifetime is an obstruction sufficient to prevent realization, being an assertion of the temporary existence of the unreal. Similarly, if you assert that you cannot attain realization in this lifetime, you are thereby preventing yourself from doing so by postulating the existence of a you who cannot attain. And yet, paradoxically, it is also an impediment to assert that no effort need be made on the pretext that as there is no being of the unreal and no not being of the real. What is that now, and has therefore no need to strive to become that? It sounds plausible, but it is an impediment because it is the pseudo itself, because it is the pseudo self, the illusory unreal, that is saying it. The master can say that there is nothing to achieve because one is that already. The disciple can't. Bhagavan would sometimes say that asking the best way to realization is like being at Tiruvannamalai and asking how to get there. But that could not be the attitude of the devotee. He expected the devotee to make effort even while appreciating the paradox that there is no effort to make. In the same way, he could say that for the realized man, there is no guru-disciple relationship, but add that for the disciple, the relationship is a reality and is of importance. For the disciple, effort is necessary, but it is also necessary to remember that effort can never attain the final goal, since he who makes the effort must dissolve, leaving only the spirit. The spirit, which is the true self, replaces the illusory ego self. When the latter is removed, the obstructions, and that is grace, the spirit flows into the vacuum, which remains when the ego self dissolves. Doing so is the choice that the spirit makes. It is for the aspirant to create the vacuum by removing the obstructions.